Welcome back to the Edit Podcast. We are all the editors of our own lives. It's time to take back control.
Welcome back to another episode of the Edit Podcast, the experiment of the decade.
And now say that in your normal voice, not in your...
Podcast voice?
Yeah.
Well, my normal voice is just a little bit more like...
laid back.
I don't care so much. Like...
Well, we watched a YouTube video earlier of one that you narrated before. That didn't sound like laid back.
Suffering from anxiety and depression is like standing on thin ice.
And it was more high-pitched.
Just gonna make myself a little drink here. It is non-alcoholic gin
Nice.
by a company called Ish. This is Ginish. Get it? It's kind of like gin. Ginish.
I think we all get it.
We are not sponsored by Gin Nish. Ish. Yet.
Wait, were you supposed to... tomorrow,
What?
that you're going to meet with him?
No, I should write him on email.
Oh, okay. So
the modality we're going to talk about today is specifically ultra running or endurance sport. Whatever one I guess it's more endurance sport than it is ultra run, given the fact that I actually have never run an ultra run.
Yeah.
Because an Ironman doesn't count as an ultra, does it?
No, we should just keep it with endurance. Then you can be in the conversation more. Because
Thank you.
have done one.
You gotta hold that. Let me have a little closer.
Okay. Yeah. Test. Yeah, you're editing you're working on making an edit of the Ironman we did back in 2021.
Yep. Which is almost 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
It's very weird to look at that footage and like it's honestly hard for me now to remember why I didn't use any of that content. Obviously I understand why, but it's like, come on, this could have been out for 3 years and done what I want it to do now. It's a little bit frustrating that I didn't have that insight then.
I mean, do you think it would have had an impact if it came out 3 years ago? To the scale that it's enough to like make you frustrated now?
It's kind of like that thing of when should you have started something? The best time to have started it was 20 years ago. The second best time is
tomorrow or no, today.
Today,
yeah.
And it feels a little bit like that. Like once I've kind of gone there mentally now, which is I want to use content. I don't want to just save it all up for this one thing.
Yeah.
Once I've crossed that bridge, I can retrospectively wish that I had done it sooner.
And it's good, I mean, because now you can really then just play around with editing it because there's no like extra footage that needs to be filmed. Isn't that so you can kind of dive into one modality in that way, editing being the modality?
There's obviously a benefit to having not just done it. That's something that you editors often struggle with is editors who specifically were part of production struggle with, I should say. So oftentimes it's mainly directors who struggle the most because they're so caught up in what they captured that it sometimes affects the edit negatively because they're so hyped about something that they know happened. And really in the edit, that might not be the best thing to use. So they'll disproportionately favor some things and not think about other things. Whereas if you give yourself enough time to separate yourself emotionally from what happened when you filmed it, it's actually normally a benefit for the bigger picture. I think 3 years is overkill, though.
Yeah. I saw a clip from Joe Rogan's podcast with Elon Musk where Elon Musk started talking about supersonic planes. And then there's a point where Joe Rogan said, I'm too stupid for this conversation.
Okay, moving on.
But
So,
I think with endurance racing, what's interesting is that we've both kind of been athletes in our life. I think it's something that's always come naturally to us. I mean, doing some kind of sport. But you, I think, out of us two, kind of first had the interest in more endurance.
Yeah.
And specifically the Ironman, I think, was the first thing that we did it together. Do you remember the first time that you got introduced to Ironman or got the idea of, like, that'd be fucking cool to do?
So, I used to do track in high school. I was pretty good at it. Did quite well in the international championships that our school was part of, which was always a big deal.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go too much into that story because it's a whole thing. But I'd never really run further than 3K in track and field. 3 kilometers being the longest race, and you don't really do much more than that in training.
And that was like horror. If you had to run the 3K, you were like, oh my God, I'm going to die.
Yes.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, that was the tough one. So then when I graduated high school, went to university, I remember I got more into going to the gym, lifting weights. I would still run on the treadmill, but again, not really ever further than that 3 kilometer thing.
Yeah.
And then I remember very, very specifically, after 4 years of not really taking sports very seriously, other than sometimes I'd have a span of like 3 or 4 months where I really went hard in the gym to try and get bigger or whatever, I started running again. It kind of coincided with when I was really actively trying to stop drinking alcohol, that I started going these runs along the Thames in London where I was living at the time. And it was one of those moments of feeling extremely low, feeling very sorry for myself, feeling kind of hopeless, depressed about everything that was going on in my life, and not being able to go to my go-to vice, which was drinking, because I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. That
I went for a 5K run.
Just like out of the blue.
Yeah. Which was at that point like the furthest I'd ever run before.
Yeah.
And I just ran as fast as I could. I felt like, I'm sure it wasn't that fast.
30 minutes.
But I finished it. I could taste blood in my mouth.
Mm.
I was like heaving. I was in so much pain, but I actually felt really like good about myself.
That's interesting.
And then I got addicted.
Especially because it sounds like that's before we got introduced to now like some of our favorite role models, like, you know, David Goggins. And
never heard of David Goggins before. Hadn't even heard of Tony Robbins before at this point. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think it's an example of having one of those experiences and then like afterwards being supported in the thing you felt, or like that unconscious feeling of like, okay, I'm struggling, things are down, let me do something. And then like the brain kind of goes to physical. That's something that you can do immediately to kind of get out of it. And then afterwards, and all the things you've read and events we've gone to, you've been like confirmed in that.
Yeah, now I can talk more intelligently about it, but at the time it was just a feeling. I feel like it was honestly random that I chose to go and do that.
Yeah.
I could have easily just chose to drink alcohol again, but in that moment I was like, fuck that, I want to do something different. And I went on this intense run, and I honestly, I don't remember, but it feels like on the spot I was like, I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to decide to do this. I'm going to start training for it.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the 5K run was supposed to be a marathon.
No. Like after that, whether it was on the spot or after a few more runs, I was like, this is work. This is something.
Yeah.
I need to explore this. I'm going to try and run a marathon. I'm going to train for it. So I started running slightly further. I remember starting to listen to audio tapes by Les Brown at that point, which quickly turned into Tony Robbins tapes after I discovered his stuff. And it became like one of the most transformational periods of my life ever.
This is like 2017, 2018? No,
this was 2016. It was before our documentary trip. It's what created that whole idea. Like on those runs, I would listen to these tapes about becoming a better version of yourself, how to take self-responsibility to another level where you actually become responsible for the situations that you've created in your life and what you can do to change them, and how you can change what you focus on based on how you feel. So I started like experimenting with this on these long runs. Started running like 10K, 12K, 15K, 20K. I remember running a 26K, all within like, 5-6 months.
Wow.
And then I
don't think I've ever heard this actually.
Well, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Maybe you've heard it.
Well, it's interesting that it's like that might have been where the whole idea got
yeah.
born, because not soon after when I turned 18, so that must have been 2017 then, December 27th and 2017.
Yeah.
That's when you gave me the whole book that kind of became the spark that lit the fire that is the Edit documentary.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. So remember, like, right after I told you we were going to make like a promotional video for a crowdfunder to raise money to go and shoot the documentary?
Yeah.
Do you remember what happened on that shoot in the mountains?
In the mountains in Switzerland?
Yeah.
When you froze?
Nope.
To death? No. What happened on the mountains?
I went over a specific jump that we were filming.
Yeah.
It's when
you tweaked your knee.
I tweaked my knee. I tore
You sent me
my some ligament. I don't remember if it's this one or it was this one.
Right.
I completely tore that and had to wear a entire full leg brace for like 2 months afterwards.
That was the most real scream I
thought I broke
heard
my
from
leg.
you at that point.
So that was like 2 months out from running my first marathon that I had actually signed up for and paid for, which was supposed to happen in Paris.
Yeah.
I don't know why it was Paris. I guess was a nostalgic place for me because that's where I had been visiting my girlfriend at the time, the year before I started running, when she was on a year abroad and I was still in the UK. So I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And we actually went to that anyways because like that was already planned to happen. So there's already flight tickets booked, and it ended up becoming like a family trip that we all went on.
Oh, in London.
I went from London. You went from wherever you were with mom and dad, and we actually watched the Paris Marathon.
Yeah. Oh, that was in Paris?
Mm-hmm.
Ah.
And at that event, you also said that you wanted to run a marathon.
Really?
Yeah, it was one of the thank you videos to someone who had donated or who had contributed to the crowdfunding campaign.
So one of those classic Carlo moments where something feels cool, and without thinking about all the work that needs to go into it, you just go, yeah, that'd be fucking cool. And then announce it to people.
Exactly.
I've talked about that with you, that I think I have a tendency to do this, get excited about some big challenge, whether it's physical or something else. And then, obviously I tell it to you, to mom and dad, and to friends that like, that's what I'm going to do. And I sort of had this like thesis that you get the most kind of reactions from the people the first time you tell them you're going to do something. Because at that point, it's completely new to them as well. So if you're saying, I'm going to run a marathon or do an Ironman or, an ultra marathon.
Wow, good for you. Oh my God, that's so cool. Like,
you're like, no way, what? Like, the furthest you've run is 10K. How are you going to do that?
So it's either supportive like I just did, or it's like, oh no, there's no way you can do that. That's way too hard. And it's also kind of exciting.
But then, if you then do train, and I mean, these are really close friends or close family, they see you doing the training, they see you getting stronger, and then to the point when you actually do it, I mean, they'll be impressed and congratulate you, but then they're expecting in the sense if they've seen you train, kind of.
Yeah.
So then it's like, oh, well done, and that's what you set out to, versus that first initial reaction. So sometimes it can become addicting to kind of keep searching for that first reaction.
Yeah.
And I think we don't have to tell all. It's not. What I'd like to hear from you is maybe if you want to fast forward to the Ironman, and then maybe you can tell like.
Your question was when did I first think of Ironman, and that the answer is while I was training for marathon. Number one. Yeah. I was consuming running content. I came across this Norseman Ironman video on YouTube. I still remember
the one
watching
where they're jumping off the ferry.
Yeah, it's like a cold weather Ironman.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I want to do that. And I remember at the time I had something called a dream box.
Yeah.
That was this Japanese puzzle box that no one could open, that inside had all my goals that I was going to achieve. It was things like, I want to make a YouTube video with Casey Neistat. I want to run an Ironman. I want to climb a mountain. It was like that kind of stuff. Ironman was in there.
And then as soon as you told me about that box, I of course bought a similar box and did the same thing because I follow in your footsteps everywhere we go. But maybe a fun thing to flash forward to is kind of before the Ironman, before we kind of decided to do it.
Well, yeah, I trained for multiple Ironmans before we actually did one.
Yeah.
So I have this history now of getting injured, and it all started with that one ski accident.
Yeah.
I trained for 6 or 7 months in Copenhagen, going to the pool twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays, to swim laps. Started doing biking, same route that we did. And then literally 2 months before my first Ironman, I jumped down from a rock climbing wall and tweaked my knee to the point where it was bleeding on the inside. You could actually see the blood under my skin for like a few weeks afterwards.
And what were you doing during that whole time? Like, obviously one thing is you're training and you're going to the pool twice a week and
running.
Other things. What are you doing on the side? Like, is that when you started?
Yeah, that's when I started. No, that's when I started Burning Boat with Taylor.
Okay.
And then I take a few months to recover and postpone the date. Do the same thing again.
Did you ever actually set a date?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, both times. Every time I've set a date.
Okay.
There's always been a date.
Okay. Yeah. This was before COVID, right?
Yeah, before COVID. And then the second time, it wasn't like a sudden injury like that. It was just from the running.
Yeah.
It started to get so bad that I could barely run like 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers at a time. I remember it was very clearly around when Oscar, my first son, was born, that I just suddenly just couldn't run anymore. And then he was born, and it was like, well, okay, what am I going to do now? So I postponed it again.
Well, I'm sure a lot of the listeners or viewers probably also have had a knee injury, and it's known for being one of those things that just is really tough to get rid of. Or
I still have it
to maximum. Yeah,
I still have it, and I still feel it sometimes, and I've been doing a lot of strength training to get it to be stronger around it. But anyways, we decided to do it together.
Yeah.
Because
well, I think what's interesting is so around like November 2022, right? We went to Unleash the Power Within together. This like big catalyst in both of our lives, which I'm sure we'll have a whole episode about.
Sure, yeah.
And then at that point, I was at a real just standstill moment in my life leading up to that, or if anything, dipping down, which I think many people were during COVID. And all I knew after this event, feeling some energy and some excitement, was I need to be around you guys. Mm-hmm. You, and we did it with your business partner, like our friend Taylor and Robin. You guys were all working together in your company, Burning Boat, and I was like, I just need to be a part of it somehow.
Yeah,
and I had no skills, and probably still don't have any skills in terms of editing. Not no skills in general, but in editing and stuff like that.
Filmmaking.
So, I asked you if I could, get a job, and you guys said you can apply, right? And you actually, I remember you called me up on a Friday night or something, or maybe it was even Saturday. No, I think it was Friday. And you said, look, you can apply, but we want you to make a video application. And it's Friday tonight, and you have to give it to us by Monday morning.
The thought being, if I remember correctly, it wasn't just to be an asshole to make you do something. It was specifically I know how important it is for you to feel like you've earned something. You don't do so well. Well, it's kind of like a love-hate relationship, I'd imagine, for you, where you do accept things that you didn't earn, that are just given to you, but then you also feel really shitty about it, and it actually causes you to crash and burn afterwards. So
and most of the times I don't actually do things to earn the thing. So
it was kind of one of those, if you really want to do this, I think it's best for you to feel like you put some effort in, so that you feel like, wow, I actually did this. It wasn't just something that my brother gave me a job at his company because no one else wanted to. So we were make a fucking video and show us why you want to do this. It was also interesting to see what you would do. Yeah.
So exactly that. And very quickly, I remember that night, I'd been out with some friends, and you gave me that call like on the way home, and it'd be so easy to kind of just at least like push it off a few days or not think of something. But immediately also after, it was still after the Unleash the Power Within. So
where you think you can do anything in the world.
Exactly.
So
and you can.
It's fitting.
And I thought I can't do anything skillfully in terms of editing, or I don't have a resume that I can talk about in terms of having worked on this and this film project. So I thought, what can I do? And I actually can push myself physically. I'd been to a sporting school. I'd also done three sports per season in middle school and high school. Like I've also been an athlete throughout my life. So like that's what I can do. And I just decided that the next day I was going to run a marathon. I was going to do a whole bunch of pull-ups and push-ups. I was going to do a climbing session. And I think I also put in an ice bath there. And I was going to film the whole thing.
Yeah.
Let's do that on Saturday, then edit it on Sunday and use it.
Yeah.
And I guess some people would argue I didn't run a marathon. I mean, I covered the distance. I covered 46K in one day.
You definitely, you did.
But, I think I ran the first half marathon basically nonstop. Then we actually met up for a climbing session, and I didn't tell anyone that I was doing this because I wanted to keep it a secret. You guys were like, what are you filming? And, I'm filming something.
Yeah, I remember.
But basically, long story short, did that, made it into a video. It really, did it impress you guys when you saw it?
100%.
Yeah.
Because I was like, this is gonna be shit. Whatever this video is, this is gonna suck balls.
And it was like 11 minutes as well.
I remember seeing that and I was like, oh no. Oh god. And then it starts and you were just like, I'm gonna run a marathon. And I immediately was like, that's a fucking good idea.
Yeah.
Because you're leaning into something that actually makes sense. And it was something that we had a personal history of, where we had signed up to do the Copenhagen Marathon together
in
a year before. And you ran 32 kilometers and then stopped.
Yeah, like a little
and just
pussy.
Got off the course. Oh god!
I called our mom and dad and they said, if it hurts, you can stop. that was all I needed.
Bothered me so much.
But it's not. It was me who decided.
Of course. But I'm like, if it had been me who was there, I would have been like, take a sec. You still got 3 hours to finish this thing. You've just got 10 more kilometers. You can just walk it, but then you'll at least finish your first marathon.
If you had been there, I would have had to run 60K.
Ironman.
So that
we don't need to talk about the whole
no.
Ironman because there's a full video. You can go watch it. It's turning into quite the piece in terms of length, but there's a lot to uncover that I personally think is very interesting. But I think what I'd like to get into is, what is it about this endurance stuff that's beneficial? Because one could argue quite easily, in fact many do, that it's unhealthy, mainly physically. It's something clearly, I'm kind of an example of that. It's not, it has quite a few risks associated with it. So why is it something that we view as a really powerful modality in this whole journey that we're on?
That's a good question. Why is it so powerful? I think, for one, it just feels like you tap into the most primal, real version of yourself when you're doing it. You get your mind in the right state. Even this morning, in our setup right now, I'm biking every morning, 30 minutes. It's a uphill bike on a fantastic bike, so I get a lot of speed. But the difference between the way I'm thinking and the way I see myself and my ability in such a short 30 minutes. So if the 30 minutes before is me just waking up and laying in bed and feeling tired and starting to doubt a lot of things, versus 30 minutes later, that shift, I think, and I can completely give that shift to the physical change in state.
The change in physiology.
The change in physiology.
So while you were talking about it, I feel like I can break it down into 4 things. 4 things that this...
Which are reasons why endurance is so powerful.
Yeah.
For us specifically, or in
me.
general? For you. Yeah, let's hear them.
It's the daily training itself, which taps into what you're talking about, the physiology change that you go through on a daily basis, that, exercise is healthy for you. Mm-hmm. It wakes you up. It makes you feel better. It gets the blood flowing. You see things more clearly for that reason. The second thing is the progress. It's something you're working towards, and you're getting better quite quickly, in fact. Like you can feel yourself more easily being able to run the distance that you ran last week this week, and it feels like, whoa, something's actually happening. There's not many things in life that are that quick. Even things like going to the gym do not have that. You can lift the same weight for months, and you're like, I'm not getting any fucking stronger. I don't see any fucking change in the mirror. Why am I doing this? Yeah. With the running, you actually really do start to see results quickly. So that's another thing.
It's very measurable.
Yeah. So the progress is huge. You feel like you're doing something. The fourth one is the actual race itself, or whatever you want to call it. It's this huge, massive challenge. Yeah. So it in itself carries a lot of juice, if you want to call it that. If you do it or not, or whatever happens, you're going to go through something on that day. Yeah. And that has a lot of lessons to be learned in it. And then the fourth one is, once you've done that, there's another thing that you can go and do. As in, there's always you can set the next distance. You can do, now I'm going to do an Ironman if I've only been doing running. Or you can always push it further, so it kind of never ends. So it's like, it's not something you do once. You're like, oh, what now?
And that's really interesting. Every big endurance event that I've experienced, at the end and during, obviously you're going on a roller coaster, but for the majority, it's like, I'm never going to fucking do this again. Yeah. Like, my body is broken. Every fiber in my being is telling me to stop. I'm not going to, because I'm so committed, but that's what it's saying, and I'm never going to do it again. And yet every time, the next morning, I've been researching new races, and I'm like, what's, so there's this thing about, there's this, I don't know if it's us, but there's this addictive.
Well, the thing is, when you go through so much pain and suffering to achieve something, and you come out on the other end feeling euphoric, you start to crave that thing that made you feel that way. It's also the added thing, at least for me, it's like, if I can do this, then what else can I do outside of the sports realm? Yeah. It feels like, who's it, Jesse Itzler, who says you need to do one thing a year that sucks so bad that the rest of your year feels easy?
Something like that, yeah.
I think there's something to that. Yeah. Once you've done that Ironman day or that ultra marathon day, you're kind of like, no other day is going to be as hard as today was. Yeah. In that way. And it lasts for a few days and weeks afterwards. But you can't just rely on it. That's why that new thing you need to start thinking about what's next, so you can keep that cycle going. But I do view it as an addiction.
But there's also a darker side to these endurance events, which is that it can hit you pretty hard, both completing and also not completing. And I have an experience of both of those. Yeah. So in January was that this year? Yeah, that was this year. 2023, the Bornholm Hammer Trail. Yeah. Right, we both signed up for an 84-kilometer ultra, so double marathon. Yeah. With, I think it's 4,000 meters of elevation total. Yeah. And, speaking for myself, I gave up after the second loop, and I was, on my watch, it was like 46K or something.
Yeah, halfway. 2 of 4 loops. Yeah. Yeah, you weren't injured. No, you just had enough.
You could argue that you're injured during endurance when you get to a certain level, but yes, nothing serious had happened. Yeah. And I essentially gave up, and that really, I think it's obviously easy to blame a certain experience, but that really threw me in a rough time there, that next month. And honestly, similarly, because then a year and a half ago, August in 2022 was when I did my 100K run. Yeah. And there was also this feeling of kind of afterwards, the next month, you're also kind of down, because you experience this ultimate high. And I was researching a lot about it, talking about usually for these big races, you put in months of work and several hours a week I had been putting in a lot of physical work, but not targeted towards that. But, I was doing other things like 75 hard at the time. And there's just this common theme in experiencing a low for whatever reason. And I'm sure there's a good reason. Dude, what would be have you experienced that? Kind of having a low after a big race? No? What about because you also dropped out of the double marathon in winter.
Right. But that was that's a complex one for me.
Yeah.
I remember, so in the same race as you,
yeah,
the knee that we've been talking about, started it just got so excruciatingly painful that I started seeing like colors every time I stepped, and the terrain.
You saw colors every time?
It was like flashing lights in my eye sockets because of the searing pain in the knee.
Yeah.
And because of the terrain, it was very, very like up and down, not on a path, on these like cliffs. And it was specifically like stepping down that I just like couldn't do, and it just couldn't hold my weight. So I would like constantly like almost fall.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say that I decided that I couldn't do anymore, because I physically tried for like, I'd say maybe like 20 kilometers to keep going, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. So I also stopped, but I felt very like angry that I couldn't keep going, because I had put in so many months of training into this thing.
And you were in one of those states that you sometimes get in where it's like nothing is going to stop me.
Yeah, I've never not finished a race.
Until then.
Yeah. I've never not finished one. So I had this mindset of there's no chance I'm not going to finish. This is just about how much it's going to suck.
Yeah.
And it caught me completely off guard that I didn't finish this. And I had built this up into this triumphant moment that I was going to achieve after a very, very tough year. A lot of failures professionally that I had like, I'm going to leave all that behind now, and I'm going to win.
Yeah.
I'm going to finally win again. And I felt like it was taken away from me in this very unfair way. And I felt very just angry in general. But I also felt very angry at you for not doing it, because I felt very, very like, if that was me, if I had your legs right now, I would do it. So why are you not doing it? I felt very upset at you for that reason. So that's what I mean by it being complex, because I was also sitting there not being able to do it. So I felt like I couldn't really push you like I normally would. But yeah, I was just like, why are you throwing this like chance away right now?
And maybe that's something to actually put a little bit more words on. Obviously, it's not fun to fail at anything, but specifically the ultras is, it's this really heightened self-battle. It's so much self-talk. Whether you want to or not, you're talking to yourself the whole way through. And I think from our experiences of succeeding, you win over that version of you that chooses the easy route, that chooses to give up. And for me, that's a version of me that has been like super present in a lot of my life, it feels like. So the experiences of succeeding have been super powerful. And I definitely say this way more than what I said just before, which was even at the 100K I maybe felt low afterwards. I think that's I don't stand as much by that statement that I know I just said it.
Yeah, you can have felt low, but there's a big difference between that kind of low of like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah, like having
and like
blown your dopamine sensors because you just had a crazy high.
And who am I really? Why did I do that? Suddenly questioning your whole sense of self.
So maybe what it is you were saying that when you do these ultra endurance feats, you feel like you can do anything, Like it feels like I'm capable of so much more than I thought possible.
Massive confidence booster.
Yeah, and the 100K was 200% further than anything I'd ever run. So then, and you know that going into these events, you're going to have this inner dialogue. There's going to be moments when you like want nothing more than to give up. There's other moments where you can see the glory and all that. So then I think the fact that I then still gave up and yielded to that version of myself, that voice that was, said stop, and you can find so many good reasons why you should stop. Then it's even more kind of, you go from this I can do anything to, and I beat that voice to like, now that voice beat me, even though now I have more experiences on my, like, what do you say, under my belt that should make me even more prepared. And I didn't fail the first time, but now I failed. That then it's like maybe throws you into a worse kind of loop of, like, fuck, I thought I was way more ahead than I was.
I mean, even with the way that I dropped out of that race, the whole last year, I've still questioned, was there something that I could have done that I purposefully chose not to do because it was so painful? Did I take a way out?
So then with both wins and losses on both our side in the endurance world, what do you feel like? Because this is we call it like one of our medicines, right?
Yeah.
That's what you call it for the edit documentary.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like you've gotten out of endurance sports?
Yeah. So right now, where the conversation is going, what I want to tap into is that it feels like you're risking something for something greater, because you're sacrificing so much time, the actual physical time, the 10 plus hours a week you need to put in, but also the pain you have to go through, the doubt about like, why am I doing this? I could be doing other things. And then like we've then both experienced that, like, well, there's no guarantee that you're actually going to be able to tick that off and actually have that big win, that big moment that you're craving to have. Yeah. So you have to be doing it for a better reason than that.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I feel like, having matured a little bit in this area, has become even more important. It's not so much about that day. Like, that's a fun thing to be able to go out and do. But what's really...
That's the loose use of the word fun.
Yeah. Not so much fun, but that's the big high, right? Yeah. That can be the big high. Mm-hmm. It's the daily training that you have to go through. And I think for me, it's become something where I'm time and time again proving to myself that even though I don't feel like doing it, I'm still going to do it. It puts me in the driver's seat and not my emotions, because it's been a fucking long time since I felt like going for a run. I honestly can't remember the last time where I've been like, I'm excited to go running in the rain right now, when I know I have a million things to do at work, when I know that I could be at home playing with my kids, or when I know that I could be asleep. I don't think I've looked forward to running in years, but I still do it because it's more important to me than how I feel.
So what for you, it sounds like, one, it's given you more clarity on what is actually important, in the sense of it's important to like ask yourself why you want to do something, to kind of anchor in on those bigger, being purpose driven towards something in other areas of your life. And then maybe also it gives you like the discipline that you need to succeed in the other areas of your life.
I think I've realized that there's nothing that's worth doing that's going to be fun the whole way. Yeah. That this skill is something that I actually feel like puts me in a position to be able to do some of the things that I actually want to do. So, and it's like such a concentrated way to practice it.
And then even more, it's like what you just said, with nothing in life worth getting is going to be fun all the way, right? Is that exactly what you just said?
Yeah.
You know, that's something we all probably know and kind of understand. But I think the endurance, things like an ultra or Ironman, it actually gives you the experience, and that's what's the difference. You know, we can all read something in a book, but when you actually have a physical experience of something where you can link some emotion to it, that's when it becomes real.
That's a really good point. And like when you compare running an Ironman to building a multi-7-figure business, or raising children, or doing any of the things that you might want to do with your life, it's arguably pretty easy compared to some of those things. Meaning it's attainable. It's more attainable.
Oh, you're talking about the ultra, right? Not,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Was my point being that it's something that you can gain access to extremely valuable information much more quickly, even though it's still on a longer time scale than, we're not talking days here. We're not even talking weeks. We're talking months. But you can learn these things much quicker than jumping straight into or only into some of these much bigger life pursuits. Because you need some of those lessons.
And we've both said, right, that it's kind of, obviously I'm 25, you are 29, but it feels like those one-day events, when I did the 100K, it was running for 14 hours. It feels like a condensed experience of what I imagine life is like. So there's also that, right, that it feels like this condensed experience. And then there's also what is really cool, for sure. And I remember I used to watch also content of people doing these kind of endurance feats and talking about, but then also experiencing it, is the whole idea that, if you're running a 100-mile race, which none of us have done yet, it's definitely on the list, but then you can't, the growth that you experience internally between mile 80 and 100, you can't experience that without having run the 80 miles before.
Yeah.
So there's also something exciting about that, like literally almost tapping into a space that you can't get to without having done all that work before. And it's actually it's a shame that it maybe not a shame, but it's a long time ago now. My last one is 1.5 years ago. I was supposed to do one in March, and I really trained for that one. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting if we were we just finished one, to kind of, what were some of those insights almost?
Well, January 29th, we'll be back on the podcast to talk about our redemption run at the Hammer Trail 2024.
What'd you say? What date?
January 29th. The race is on the 28th.
Don't miss next week's episode of the Edit Podcast. Subscribe now.